Hello and welcome back. I'm Nicole, a cottage witch, and today is my week in books, mostly books, a little bit of tarot, and it's actually the last 2 weeks because I was too unenergetic to do anything last week. So it's still the tarot readathon, the significator challenge, the major arcana challenge. Cards were the King of Cups, which is a book featuring a wise character, the Wheel of Fortune, represents your favorite season. And then this week it is The Fool, which is a book that's new to you. So some of these books will overlap with those, which is kind of the point. So my first one was Judgement, which is a book you've been reading for a long time. So I don't know how long ago I started this one. Last year, I think. It's been a while. And then I just sort of stalled. So I wanted to finally finish it. This is Beyond the Veil, Male-Female Dynamics in Modern Muslim Society. By modern, it means, I think, about 85 to 90, somewhere in there. 87. So yeah. So it's modern-ish at this point. But it's really, really interesting. It's not a beginner book on the subject. It is very academic, and you sort of do need some cultural context before going into it, but it's fascinating. So that is Judgment. Then, The Moon is a book that explores the supernatural or paranormal. And for that, I read The Witches of New York, which had been on my shelf for a while as well. I hadn't started it, but it had just been sitting there for several years. And it is so much fun. It's actually quite accurate if you're into witchy things. And it's set in the late 1800s sometime, 1880. 200 years after Salem. They're in New York. There's a doctor who is, I assume, Christian and really anti-witch. He's like the, at that point, modern day witch hunter. And then there's another shop. 3 people basically in a witchy sort of metaphysical shop. It's quite good fun. So I enjoyed that. I think has she got other books along these lines? I think she has. I don't think they're in here because this was written first, but I think they exist. I'll have to look into them because this was really fun. Then I read The Hermit. I didn't read The Hermit. The next card is The Hermit, a book you think you can read in one sitting, which that is not The Hermit. Good, I'm on a roll. This is The Hermit. Why Read the Classics by Italo Calvino is the book that I read, which I probably could have read in one sitting and didn't in the end, but oh well. It's a book about different books, different classics that he loves. So the most interesting section was the sort of introduction, which is Why Read the Classics, which was my favorite part. A lot of these are books that I'm either not interested in or they're Italian classics, and I don't read a lot of Italian classics. Some of them are ancient Roman ones. So if you like that sort of thing, you might like this. He did get into a couple French authors like Stendhal and Balzac that I've got to read one of these days here, and then a few that I have read. So when he got into the more modern-ish classics, like Victorian literature to the late 1800s, that was more interesting to me. I really got to read Borges at some point. You'd think I would have by now, but I haven't. Anyway, it was fun. I liked it. I think that, how many does it say? 36 essays. So none of them are terribly long. And they're just essays about books and what he thinks about the books that have meant a lot to him, which is always fun to read. And then The Four of Cups, which is Principal, what's his name, is a book you didn't think you'd read. So a few years ago, I never would have guessed I'd read this book. This is The Book of Rhymes, The Poetics of Hip Hop by Adam Bradley. So hip hop is not like my sort of music generally. It's not my culture. It's not, I don't know a lot about the history. I don't know a lot about the traditions. I've been learning a lot about them. This book is part of that. And then I made, or am making, a Spotify playlist of a lot of the rappers who he talks about in here. So this book was written in, hold on, 2009. So it's also a little bit out of date. Appendix, copyright 2017. So he did update it a little bit, but it's still, it's a bit not got the latest people. But it's got the origins of hip-hop, which is fun. So yeah, I've been listening to a few different artists, trying to get to know a little bit more about the tradition, and it's fun. I like it. 7 of Cups. Oh, okay, ran out of space. Is this one. And this is pick one blindfolded from multiple options. And so I ended up with Fathers and Sons by Ivan Turgenev, which had been on my TBR for a good while. I liked it. I didn't love it as much as I thought I would, but I liked it. It was good. I'm glad I read it. There's a lot about Russian literature that I like. And there was some, I think, which philosophy? Nihilism comes up a lot in here. I think I probably should have read a bit more about that as I was reading this book, because it's really sort of central to the story. But it's basically a family story in the 1800s, and how a couple of brothers and their father and their paths diverge. Yeah, I liked it. It's good. I don't like it as much as I like, Dostoevsky or Solzhenitsyn or Nabokov, but I liked it. 7 of, this is not the 7 of Pentacles. Which one is this? This is the, I hate Roman numerals, 9 of Swords. Which is, I can't remember the prompt for this because I seem to have gotten them mixed up. But I read the Cambridge Companion to British Romantic Poetry. I'd started this back in probably March, because I was on a big poetry kick earlier this year. And I really, really liked it, but then I got sidetracked. Not because it wasn't a good book, but just because I read based on whatever I'm interested in at the moment, and I have like cyclical hobbies. They just rotate. And so for a while I wasn't reading about poetry. And then now I am. So I finished it, and it's a lot of fun. There are a few essays that are there were a couple that were quite academic. The one at nearest the end, though, that I really liked was the medium of poetry. So this Coleridge at one point said, "For as to the devotees of the circulating libraries, I dare not compliment their pastime, or rather kill time, with the name of reading. Call it rather a sort of beggarly daydreaming, during which the mind of the dreamer furnishes for itself nothing but laziness and little mawkish sensibility." Basically, this essay is about changing views on reading versus like reading silently in your head, which was new at the time in the turn of the 1700s to 1800s. Because even though things had been written before then, they'd either been plays that had been performed or poetry that was read aloud or written to be memorized and then recited. And so having books that you could print en masse that people could just read silently in their head was very new, and they had strong feelings about it. And so it was very interesting because, of course, now people have very strong feelings about TV and how, reading is a skill that's declining and so on. But it is interesting because reading silently in your head is only like a 200-year-old tradition. In most places, oral traditions, and even writing things down to preserve oral traditions is much, much longer. So yeah, that was interesting because it's always interesting to hear what people complained about then versus what people complain about now, and what people thought qualified as poetry then, because they did not think that everything that rhymed qualified as poetry. And there were some strong feelings about that too. So that was fun. And then I listened to, for the Hierophant, the prompt is poetry. So for this one, I listened to Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, which was a lot of fun. It wasn't as fun as Don Juan, which is more sarcastic. The sarcasm level in that one is cranked up a lot, and it's so much funnier. This is beautiful, but it's not as fun. One of my favorite sections is in the third canto, So it's basically he's just wandering around Europe observing things. And he starts in Spain and then ends up in Albania and Greece and then Germany and then Switzerland, I think. I can't remember. Anyway, there's one little section here that says, "Then stirs the feeling infinite, so felt in solitude, where we are least alone, a truth which through our being then doth melt and purifies from self. It is a tone, the soul and source of music, which makes known eternal harmony and sheds a charm, like to the fabled Cytherea's zone. Binding all things with beauty, 'twould disarm the spectre of death, had he substantial power to harm." That's my favorite part, I think. So those are the books I read in the last couple of weeks. And I didn't say at the beginning, but I was using the Buffy the Vampire Slayer tarot because it's fun and the world's a mess. I'll also show you a couple other tarot decks I used, which I've shown many times before because they're favorites. One is the Gentle Tarot. This is the one in this tin, and it's adorable. I know she's redoing it, but I like this version so much. I kept watching a couple of TV shows to practice French and Arabic. So for Arabic, I switched to the Red Queen because a couple of the American TV shows were just too stupid for words. I couldn't cope. Apologies to Americans. But honestly, they were so dumb. Anyway, so I started the Red Queen, which is a Spanish show. And it's really interesting so far. I'm only 2 or 3 episodes in. I'm not very far in. Because it's slow going. I don't watch a lot at one time. But apparently it's based on a book. So I might have to listen to I did find that there is an audiobook in French. I think the first volume in French is free. Well, free if you have an Audible, so free-ish. Free as in you already pay for it on Audible. So I might listen to that. I've also been listening to 24, the TV show in French. I say listening because I almost never watch it. It is very melodramatic, but in its defense, it was the first of the over-the-top melodramatic anti-terrorism shows post 9/11. So at least it was original, sort of. And it does get a bit silly and over the top sometimes, but it's fun and it's confidence building in that I can understand it in French almost entirely. I'm listening to another book by a French Guyanan, I don't know if that's the way you say that, author, which is much harder. I'm not understanding nearly as much of that book. So, you know, the TV show level is a much lower comprehension level, which just makes it easier to follow. But it's nice to have a balance of things that are easy to understand versus things that are, you know, a bit challenging. Because if everything was hard all the time, it would get a bit demoralizing. How can I not get that? Okay. And the other deck I used is one that I made for myself of local plants that I use in herbalism and this sort of animist-ish path that I seem to be on at the moment. So yeah, this is the Prairie Herbalist Tarot. And I love it because I have, you know, or I'm developing relationships with these plants, and they're all pictures that I took of plants in my area that I know. And so yeah, it's quite meaningful to me. So yeah, that's my book and tarot situation for the last couple of weeks. The readathon will be over on, it's the last day of the month, Thursday? I think Thursday. So next weekend I'll do the wrap up of the last week of the readathon. Anyway, that's all I've got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.